It was like in paradise, and the fairy was looking at the fountain, thinking about the future in which the car crashed. There were many people there, but when she saw that it was urgent, she decided to go to help. Currently, Koji was in his corporate office, listening to the boss, who assigned him to fix something by that day. His shift was already very close, but because of those soft words that the manager said, he thought his shift was starting, and when Koji looked, he realized the work had come 3 days ago. He was assigned so late without warning, and the boss did not like it at all. He started shouting. Looking at him, he asked if she was ready to do it or not. Receiving a simple answer that left no other choice, Code decided to do it. He was introduced as Koji Mito, who had been working in a black company for 13 days. After long efforts and work, when he finally returned home, he barely stood on his feet. His boss always had the habit of keeping him late at work at the last minute. Tomorrow was a day off. When he was about to take something, suddenly something from somewhere caught his attention. In his mailbox, something was lying, and when he opened it, he found a packet labeled Seed of God, which turned out to be a sample of some nutritional supplement. He decided to try it because he came across something that fascinated him. He held the mysterious seed and wondered whether to give in to this strange prank. The next morning, he decided to take the first step. He took soil from the nearest park and filled half a glass with it. As the second step, he pressed a hole in the soil with his finger up to the second joint of his index finger. He took several seeds from the packet, planted them in the soil, and watered until it became moist. After these small tasks, he looked happy. But he didn't even have time to blink when veins suddenly appeared in his eye, and something appeared in the fruit, and inside was a little girl. He called her the goddess of the fruit, and at the moment he touched her, the fruit cracked open and the goddess fell to the floor. An awkward moment between them, because no one knew what was really happening. However, the goddess seemed to recognize the man and no longer resisted. She decided to introduce herself as Nori, the goddess of agriculture. After a formal introduction, Nori explained that she came to save his life. Koji was completely speechless and did not understand. She explained that after hard work he always fell asleep during rest because he did not know how to relax. And she saw a vision of him dramatically entering the little shop, so she was there to save him. For Koji, all this was quite clear, and he understood that by words of salvation she meant his current job, where he had many responsibilities. Someone even suggested breaking ties with them, but it did not work, so Nori decided to take matters into her own hands, and told him that she would make him happy with things that should not even matter. She took something from inside her balloons and handed it to him, saying it was a seed of utopia that would create a perfect world for him. At first, they needed to go and get materials necessary for preparation, so they both drove to the supermarket and Nori just smiled. Her wandering near the trunk was dangerous, so Koji told her not to behave like that because of the requirements for growing vegetables. They needed a mat to spread out, so they were looking for magnesium olivine. However, Koji knew that they would not be able to buy the precious stone at the home goods store. The goddess noticed something and pointed it out, telling him to get the marble nameplate, which would serve well as a substitute for what was needed. She did not try to hide or avoid attention, and Koji was stunned by this. When the shopping was finally finished and they paid for the necessary items, Koji noticed that the materials were quite expensive, about 7,000 yen. Once they had everything, they decided to return home, and Nori, meanwhile, was eating chocolates that they definitely had not planned to buy. Now she was giving him instructions on how to act in the first step. He needed to evenly spread 2.5 bags of soil over the plot, pouring it onto the marble. He was working when his boss called and said that he needed to come immediately. Having no choice, he had to go to work, even though he had already worked for 2 weeks straight. So he immediately rushed off, apologizing to the girl and promising to return by evening, and Nori only asked him to be careful. When he left, she decided to take matters into her own hands. She planted the utopia before his arrival. It seemed she was waiting for something to happen, and in a few minutes it did, and a bright smile appeared on her face. After another 10 hours of work, Koji finally returned completely exhausted. As soon as he opened the gate with a bell, he saw that Nori was sleeping and drooling. However, Koji was not worried at all, because he never told her when he would return. Nori was not satisfied because she wanted to warmly greet the boy when he returned, so they decided to do it again. When he opened the gate on command, he was greeted by the lady, and it was much better than expected. The greeting was full of applause, and a sparkle shone on her face, and when he changed into his usual clothes, he found that the task remained. However, he was even more impressed. When he approached the place where he had piled the soil, he saw that something had already been created, and it was inside the dome. Rivers, buildings, and another world were visible. She explained that she had made it, filled with magical power and keeping his wish in mind. She was very proud to have fulfilled Koji's request and believed that he could change when he wanted. But Koji could not express gratitude with words alone, so she stopped him from speaking further. The woman gently kissed him on the forehead and clarified that she wanted to find out what exactly he wanted to say from the heart. Then she told him that, being a goddess, she easily reads the heart of her subordinate, but did not want to say what exactly she saw at that moment. She recalled that Koji had just returned from a 10-hour shift and was probably tired, but Koji, interested in learning everything about the fascinating world he was to govern, asked her to start immediately. As ordered, Nori decided to start with the task and danced a strange dance, something that looked as if she was constantly reading a spell, summoning the magic of the wind. She gathered everyone in one place, said that the magic was moderate, and finally listened to her inner desire to go to Utopia together with Koji. A bright light from nowhere that frightened him, but already in a moment, when he opened his eyes, Nori was much bigger. When he looked at her, he could not understand the reason for this. She explained that in that world she would be the same size as him, and those words sounded too exaggerated. Koji looked around and noticed that he was not near his plate. The place was a utopia that she created only for him. The atmosphere there was also quite interesting, and the place seemed amazing to him, but something was wrong. It was completely empty there. No one was around. Probably it was an abandoned city. However, it was strange because creating the utopia, she thought about attracting many people. While they were talking, something else caught their attention. When they looked up, they saw that something was flying above them. It was recognized as a great whale. At first, Koji praised the girl for creating something he had never seen in his life. But suddenly, the face of the woman who said that this was by no means part of the plan changed sharply. She had not yet finished the sentence when a new event happened. That whale suddenly pulled Koji. The woman grabbed his hand and tried to protect him, but the force was too great. Although they did not want to let go of each other's chickens, it happened. That man was sucked in by the mysterious whale, something he had never planned. The world seemed completely bad. The woman kept calling Koji, but could do nothing because, reducing him, the whale simply moved away, waving its tail. Inside the monster's stomach, a drop of water fell on Koji and he woke up. He thought about Nori, but then realized that there was nothing in front of him except a cave-like structure. Trying to understand, he realized that he had already been swallowed by the whale, and the place where he was now had to be the stomach. Because there was no better option, so he chose this. It was not the worst, because something else awaited ahead. He turned around and thought that he might ask Nori to help him. He saw several small monsters looking at him with the intent to kill. Again, he had no other choice but to run away from them to save his life. The number of monsters sharply increased, and he ran as far as possible trying to find a solution, recalling Nori's words about magic. Since he could not run forever, he decided to try magic and immediately stretched out his palm. He addressed the world of magic and created a sphere before him, which shocked him. He had not yet realized when he noticed that nothing happened from that light. The creatures were not harmed at all. It was magic that Koji was completely unprepared for. However, under the influence of that light, those monsters temporarily retreated. Koji did not want to figure out how it worked because what saved his life already protected him from any harm. In a moment, he could no longer stand on his feet, and thought that it might have happened due to fatigue that drained his strength at an inopportune moment. He fell to the floor and someone present became worried about his condition. When the whale flew over the abandoned city, Nori lay on the floor and could not understand how to save the life of the one she was attached to. Calming down a little, she thought that the whale might be the result of some malfunction in the utopia. This thought troubled her even more, so she decided to run after it. However, it did not help, because the whale was so high that neither she nor her strength could reach it, so she could only pray for her husband's health. After some time, Koji came to his senses. This time he saw not just a hole, but what had pierced it. It turned out that it was a woman who was looking at him and worrying about his health. Frightened again, the man stepped back, but she told him that it was safe there. He gathered his thoughts and decided to listen to what she would say. The woman introduced herself as Karna and said that she had taken him to a safe place when he was unconscious. Koji also introduced himself and apologized for misjudging her. When he looked back, there were not one but many mermaids behind him. But one thing seemed strange. None of them clearly noticed his presence. It turned out that all of them lacked one of the senses. Because they did not see at all, Koji asked to explain, and the lady explained that they were swallowed by a whale named Teresa Greed. He could see at that moment because he had just been swallowed by a whale. But his magical energy was already gradually leaking out, which helped the whale survive. OG felt the same and realized that in a few days he would go blind and become invisible. Karna explained that Koji's light, which she called a miracle, restored her sight when she asked him for something. He helped and used that light to restore the sight of all the mermaids present. In fact, the light could gently heal wounds and cure diseases and ward off evil, but their situation remained as dangerous as before. She remembered how Nori explained that it was not her creation, it was just the next course of events. While he was still looking for a solution, Karnakine waved her mermaid tail in gratitude for what he had done, and it meant a lot to him, but they still needed to find a way out of there. Koji tried to understand and discovered that deeper in the whale's stomach there were two parts. The first covered with insects, and the second with hydrochloric acid that would corrode him, and he was still searching for an idea on how to get out of there. Suddenly he remembered Onheim, where Koji found a way out of the whale by lighting a fire. That was the only thing they could do at that moment. They told Karna about the plan to smoke out the Greek terrace from the inside and get rid of it, because for that they needed fire, so they needed something to light it. Koji took out a smartphone and 5 mint chewing gums, telling her that he knew how to do it. He pulled the battery out of the phone, made the chewing gum foil thinner, and when they were about to ignite the spark, they needed something that burns, so Koji decided to use his clothes, and a small spark caused smoke inside. All the mermaids present were impressed by his intelligence. He ordered everyone to gather everything they could find around and that could be used for fire. Since they had a lot of material, the fire flared up, and he realized it worked because it burned painfully from the inside. His plan worked, and the Greed Terrace began to descend from the air. Koji was glad that if they fell from such a height they would definitely get out of its jaws, and there was a sea around, so they needed to. Worried that if the whale fell there they would definitely drown. However, their chickens did not experience this, so they left everything as it was outside. Nori saw the whale falling and noticed that smoke was visible. This gave her synchronization of memories. She realized that it was Koji's idea, reproduced through the enemy. Taking advantage of the opportunity, she decided to act immediately. Standing on the roof of the building, she began to pray, calling the trees and other magical forces, focusing in the light to give her the necessary power. The more she prayed, the more her appearance changed and she became covered with wood. She had not yet managed to understand how her body became covered with leaves, as if they were all obeying the goddess's command, as soon as she received the full shield, she somehow ordered from the trunk that grew from the ground to point directly at the whale. The attack was so strong that the constant blows made the monster bleed around the waist area. It seemed the whale was suffering and even opened its mouth. The woman was glad the strike succeeded. Although she began to tremble from the absolute power she had to expend to control it. She asked Koji to come out because it was his only chance. Now all the mermaids, including Koji, were clinging to something so as not to fall into the belly. Since the thrust came from below, he realized it was an external influence, and the Greed Terrace was raging now. They almost dropped the stone they were holding because, if this continues, they will fall into the stomach uncontrollably. It was then that Grant found a way out of the body and began to approach them, as if they were trying to hide it. Soon a barricade was built from the tree. The mermaids and even Koji could not understand what had happened. The next second something grew from the middle, and it turned out that Nori had found a way to climb up through those wooden veins. When they interacted, an awkward silence fell for a moment. Then a sharp scream sounded, and only after a moment did they realize they knew each other. Nori was very happy to see that Koji was not her at all, and asked him to wait a minute so they could go down and save everyone. Koji was happy for Karna and the other mermaids who were safe. Stan Norris was different. She tried to look strong but could not keep up her strength for long. Branches began to break. She is about to fall. She was losing consciousness because she had no strength left. Koji found the right moment and immediately approached to catch her in the air. He was embarrassed because she had no arms or legs at all. She explained that she absorbed life to get to the shore, and at that moment helped them. What worried her most was that the branch holding the flying whale began to break. Koji knew that they needed to run away right now to avoid the consequences of the collapse. But something else awaited them when the monsters that had appeared earlier came to attack him. He tried to save the woman, kicking them away because he had to somehow deal with it. So he realized that Nori was coming to her senses and asked him to hold her a little longer. Suddenly she gathered strength again and stood up to protect them, using branches to attack the monsters as if she had never lost consciousness. She attacked so fiercely that she knocked them all down at once. Koji was confused by the sudden change because just a few minutes ago, she was in his arms asking for support. He was more worried about her limbs, which were now missing. At his request, she immediately restored her previous appearance with limbs in place, and the branches disappeared completely. Koji could not understand whether it was a transformation or a restoration. Nori blushed slightly and explained that it was similar to monster power, and she simply had those abilities, and Koji was surprised but glad that the goddess finally came to his aid. They were talking when a mermaid appeared from somewhere. She interrupted them to say that she heard noise from nowhere. It was strange. In a moment, the tree the whale was holding onto broke and they all began to fall. It was time again for Nori to gather strength and save everyone. It seemed she was approaching Koji to hug him. As soon as their bodies touched, she was able to use her tree power and grab everyone, instantly saving them from falling. She was like a spider weaving a web to keep everyone intact while the whale fell to the ground. When Koji opened his eyes, he was surprised to see that she had managed to save everyone. The lady had just rejoiced that everything went as she wanted. The time had come when the goddess had to make the final move to open the way for their escape. She crafted a drill from her hands and forcefully stuck it into one corner of the whale, making a hole, for which she received thanks from everyone present. As soon as they went outside, an impressive view of the utopia she had created just for him opened before them, for the sake of his dreamed life. Before they could enjoy it, the lady was already exhausted and almost fainted. Hoji wanted to do something to pull her out of that suffering. These words brought joy to Nori, and she immediately asked him to hold her properly at least once. They had already gotten out of trouble. The request was strange, and Koji could not understand it. She explained that by clinging she could restore her divine power. Koji had never talked to a woman in his life, so he was embarrassed when he looked at her balls, because there were quite a few of them. The mermaids behind acted like cheerleaders and constantly urged him to do what they asked without questions, and the atmosphere was tense. And since the request was from a beautiful woman who allowed him to touch her, it was another favor for what she had done for him. These words only made him even more embarrassed. All this happened, and finally he gently approached her to hug her by the breasts. This was considered the first step of resettlement to Utopia. The mermaids in the background rejoiced upon seeing the place. The situation was becoming more and more tense, and this mermaid clearly stood out by her behavior. She asked both of them to come closer to each other. She grabbed the boy's hand, and in a seductive voice asked if he would give her his heart, and suddenly Koji found himself in a light that he himself could not understand. Nori explained that the light meant their return to the original world. When they were about to leave, Koji waved to the mermaids, hoping to meet them next time. But one mermaid did not want to let go and somehow pushed her hands into the light. The suit and both of them entered the primary world when Koji opened his eyes and felt a little heavier. Looking around, he realized that he had finally returned to his world, but noticed something strange. The goddess was screaming, and on her face it was clear that something had gone wrong. When Koji looked, he realized that he had brought a mermaid from Utopia back to his previous world. Karna was also surprised to find herself in this. It took them some time. But finally they understood that the utopia they created was faulty. The existence of the Terrace of Greed and the fact that Karna came into the world from paradise were clear evidence of this. The goddess tried to remember what had happened, and said that everything happened because she accidentally used marble instead of a normal base. But this could not be a big problem. In simple words, no one knew the reason for this phenomenon, and the goddess did not know either, so she just pouted. She was going to create everything from scratch. However, the mermaid was surprised by these words. She was worried about what would happen to the world where her people survived. The goddess explained that a catastrophe would come and the world would turn into a lifeless mass of flames, and everything would be created anew. Imagining this, she realized that this would not be the best step. Koji also understood that one cannot be so insensitive as to destroy the world, and at the same time tell one of its survivors that this will happen. He decided to look for another way. The goddess knew that once a utopia is completed, it cannot be changed externally, except by destroying it, so it is necessary to fix the parts that cause problems. This was a sudden surprise for Koji. He was not ready for this from the very beginning. He remembered that in the corporate world, he had resolved such matters more than once and was well versed in it, so he immediately said that they would not start the utopia from scratch, but they would remove the so-called error and restore it. This decision brought tears of joy to the goddess, but she wiped them away and immediately accepted the proposal with optimism. The mermaid found it hard to understand what they were talking about, so she simply asked him to help. Koji agreed. They say they will not abandon her world just because of some problems, as that would be too cruel. The goddess also believed this and asked the lady not to worry. She said that they would take care of it, and suddenly an idea came to her mind. She reported that when Koji falls asleep, he will be immediately transferred to that world, although it was a strange system. The goddess was about to explain how it actually works, but her stomach had other plans and was growling from hunger. She felt embarrassed because she had already eaten a lot before and was still hungry. She explained that to use great power fuel is needed, and Koji was not very tired right now. He decided to prepare the transmission settings by evening because the next day was a day off and they could go buy the necessary things. He even invited the mermaid not because he wanted to, but because her eyes constantly asked for it. She was most concerned about the lower part, which had the shape of a fish, but he decided to take care of her without unnecessary worries. The next day, everyone was in Koji's car, and the mermaid was delighted to see the view outside the window. She was disguised in clothes with a Star Wars skirt and sheets to hide the lower part of her body, and they even listened to music in the car. The goddess danced a lot and began to talk about what other monsters could be in the world besides the one they had encountered. The mermaid recalled that after a certain day others always came to trade, but no one came. The man was deeply shocked, even jumped when the red light turned on, and found out if different races really exist in the world. She confirmed the presence of cat and dog creatures, people with wings, fairies, and others, including several beasts. He was riding, and the goddess was on his head. He imagined everyone in his head as girls. Now they were worried about elves who stopped coming, and mermaids who could not climb the mountains themselves to check. Koji felt that something was happening there, so he decided to include it in their next plan, and check through that bug. The goddess agreed with a pleasant smile and promised to stay until the restoration was complete. They made a plan. It was time to get to work and gather materials. When they reached the shopping center, Koji borrowed a wheelchair to transport the mermaid, and all three enjoyed the visit, tasting different dishes and shopping. They even went to the cinema, and later he took the mermaid shopping, and the dress she bought looked beautiful. In the evening they returned home with a bunch of food. Koji was going to fry bacon for dinner, and the others helped in their own way. The others were busy with their work, and the goddess was attracted by what she had acquired from everyone for her purposes. She told them that the task needed to be completed as soon as possible because they would return to Utopia as soon as they fell asleep. She explained that as soon as Koji falls asleep, all his body will automatically move there. The place was supposed to be where they returned from after the last visit, but she was not sure about it because there were many bugs there. Due to uncertain circumstances, Koji prepared bacon and served it to both. He was impatiently waiting for the village they were going to explore next. In the Utopia itself, in a corner on the other side of the mountain, they hid one of the elves. She was very young, and many people cried, looking at her for the last time, after they buried her in tears. They immediately returned to their village. They did not suspect that something was happening there that had not happened before. In the next scene, someone stood aside from the village and watched the guards who were yawning and doing their job. Suddenly, when they recognized the girl who was coming from there, they could not believe their eyes and were in complete shock. One of the guards was cautious and asked for details, while the other was cleaning dirt and a wound. When he reached into his pocket, Liddy suddenly changed her character, and everything darkened for a while. Next time, the scene showed the girl in the center of the village, and everyone else was biting and eating each other like zombies. Even the girl did not know and cried because of what she had done. After those guys ate their bacon and returned to Utopia, they were more worried about the damage from the giant whale, because it was quite dangerous. Nori took full responsibility, but the mermaid denied it because she knew that Nori saved everyone. The world decided to start with restoration as the first step. After eating, they decided to lay out the futon because it was time to rest next. When they fell asleep, they returned to Utopia. This time Koji was on the floor with two women above him, both quietly squatting and unpacking things a little. Koji assessed the situation at the whale's crash site. They needed to find where to move the boat before it decomposed. It was necessary to constantly take care of this, look after the village, and resolve the location issue, so they had to set priorities. Koji asked how far the village was, and learned that the road would take about half a day. After considering both options, Koji decided to first go to the village, then return to resolve the other issue. Karna decided to wait for him and wish them luck as they set off with packed bags. When they headed into the mountains, they walked without stops, and the goddess Nori led them enthusiastically. Singing a song, she told its story, explaining that it was a children's song from the heavens. This song was often sung during hikes. At tourist schools, it was also frequently sung during lectures. After a short walk, they reached the far edge of the forest. Nori pointed at someone and said she noticed an elf who might be looking for something. Suggesting they investigate, Koji approached and asked for information about the village. But the elf did not move a finger, so Koji thought the elf could not hear him. Koji tried to signal, but his face changed when the elf turned around, and it turned out her buttocks were covered with mushrooms, as if something had infected her. This was not the end. Her body was covered with mushrooms from head to mouth. When they tried to understand what it meant, the elf suddenly attacked. They could do nothing but run, so they fled as fast as possible, both searching for answers to what had happened. But Koji ran with difficulty because the bags with various food were pulling him down. He constantly insisted that Nori use magic and find a way out, because they needed a miracle from the gods. He was ready for anything to escape, but he did not take the opportunity. Turning to face the elf covered in mushrooms, she took a stance, prepared a strike, and when the elf tried to attack her with a lunge, Nori released a wooden rope, catching the elf and restricting his movements, and said that the elf was 10 years too early to defeat her in forest combat. Both of them tied him with 2 or 3 ropes and tried to see what it really was. However, by the body structure, it was clear that it was definitely an elf. and the circumstances indicated that a fungus was parasitizing on him, as if horror movies where something gets inside and controls the body. Nori knew about this because she peeked at evening movie screenings through the sky, and it sounded a bit illegal because she didn't have tickets. Koji was more worried about the village because he feared that if this was true, everyone there could die. Plot twists seemed to indicate that they were about to be attacked by a whole horde of infected, but this was unprecedented. Nori noticed something and asked him to be silent. Skillfully and carefully, he moved forward, and Nori suddenly used her magic and grabbed 2 more people. She warned that among the trees and in the corners, enemies could be hiding anywhere, so they needed to be careful. The one she caught turned out to be an infected elf without mushrooms on the body. After clarifications and examination, all 4 sat down to discuss the matter. But the couple looked very hungry and ate everything they could. They cried with happiness while eating food with smiles on their faces. Koji clarified whether the mushrooms were capturing these elves, because they did not control their bodies at all. Mailal confirmed that it was an infection, because everything happened during hunting in the forest, and he found the unconscious one. Everything was covered with mushrooms. When the companion tried to help, this person suddenly started coughing, and mushrooms were spat out with every cough. The reaction somehow spread, because the next second that companion attacked another, and they realized that the only way to be safe now was to flee and return to the village to inform everyone. Koji understood that the infection and symptoms appeared after contact, and everything resembled a zombie movie. At that moment he was shocked, remembering that the goddess had entered the fight with that monster without preparation, and now he was looking for confirmation from her. And although in the end she looked a little silly, it turned out that she was fine. The reason why the infection did not affect her was that she was the goddess of plants, and goddesses were poisonous, so such microbes did not affect her. She proudly said that her body could neutralize anything in a few seconds, and that she was practically invulnerable, and now they even had a plan in case a crowd of infected tried to attack. They could have simply tied them with a rope and then looked for medicine. Then Koji remembered the magical light that restored the mermaid's sight in the whale, and when he took it out, Nori also recognized it as the light that could heal everything. Koji even decided to approach the infected person, but another elf who was in good condition immediately asked him to step back, because the man suffered because of the light, and he explained that the infected react strongly to it and become furious and crazy. Understood that they could not just sit and wait for the matter to be resolved. He was very worried, and when the goddess noticed it, she explained to him that she would handle it herself. There was nothing to worry about. She asked him to return to the port with the elf while she dealt with everything else, but Koji was not interested and refused, saying that after a short rest he would be able to stand on his feet, and as a man he could not leave the girl alone. He therefore asked to do it together. The way he said it was quite amazing, and it opened the eyes of the woman who, she was glad that he would go with her, and in her excitement asked what she thought a polite boy might not understand, because boys are very sensitive about the question of their virginity. Koji could not understand this. The situation was getting worse, but he decided not to give up completely, saying that it is completely normal to be part of this because they did not cause any problems. Although Koji suffered a lot, he decided not to speak anymore, and they both headed to the village, waiting for the couple. After a long continuous journey, they somehow finally reached the village of elves, and it turned out to be much calmer than they expected. They investigated one of the bodies, which was in the same condition as the one they saw in the forest. They realized that the village was full of them. Such a situation repeated at every step, and this showed them that there was no salvation anywhere. They heard a whistle from one of the corners and decided to go there. Thinking that there might be someone there they could save, they had to cross a small stream on wooden planks and approach the gate of the house from where the voice was coming. When they approached the lawn near that house, they saw a beautiful young girl who was constantly murmuring in a soothing voice. When both noticed, they realized that she was the only survivor from the entire village. Both approached her, pretending to be rescuers, and asked if there was anyone else alive. But the girl, who remained there alone for a long time, found no one. The thing was that although she had been there for several days, no one attacked her, and the lady was puzzled because every time someone tried to attack, people just passed by her. Both looked at each other and tried to understand what this meant. And then they concluded that, like in the movies, she might be the girl with immunity. They did not understand those words. But the goddess explained that if she agreed to cooperate, they could immediately prepare medicine with her help. The plan was to take some of her blood and tune it into her body to create and grow the seed. If everyone receives the fruit of this seed, they will also be disinfected. The whole process will take quite some time. However, since Nori was the goddess of the forest, she could grow as much as needed in a day. She jokingly said that in every zombie movie there has to be someone like that to solve this problem. Since it was already evening, they decided to return to the port first. However, the little girl sitting there felt discomfort in her body. Tears were already welling up and she clenched her fist tightly. As soon as Koji noticed, he approached her and said he would find a solution for everything. His words calmed her. He instilled in her the belief that they would leave there for a safer place and find a solution. The girl was glad to hear these words but could not say a word, only explaining that it meant nothing. When they reached the middle of the forest, Nori was ahead again, taking care of everyone in the village, binding them with her spell and taking them all away. At one moment, like a pure goddess who controls herself. By that time, she was talked about 10 times more. They said that no one in the forest could defeat her, and that they might have been 100 years too early. Koji explained to the woman that the girl could have just acted that way. He could not recall her name and thought to take her back to where she was to calm her down. This time he coughed a little. As they continued walking, his condition worsened more and more. When the port was approaching, after a few seconds he began coughing more strongly, indicating a cold and risk of infection. Possibly there were 2 of them. Hoji decided to call upon a wonderful light to resolve this, thinking it was just fatigue. However, he noticed that the color of that light had changed greatly, so they needed to see a doctor as soon as possible. They were only trying to understand what awaited them next, because the condition could worsen. Nori said it was life-threatening, and they needed to return immediately to the world of the living. She was even ready to cut her wrist and give him a cup of her blood so he would recover immediately, but that was too much. Therefore, they decided to postpone the plan. Upon reaching the port, they met a couple who had been waiting for them all the time with a smile. And again, when he waved back at them, he began coughing heavily, and his condition quickly worsened. Already the next second he noticed that this time the cough spat out several mushrooms, and this clearly indicated that he was also infected. And the couple was worried about them because they did not return on time and feared they were also trapped. Standing between Nori and Koji, those guys saw the face of the woman who was in the middle. They remembered her resemblance to the one buried in the forest, shuddered to the bone, and shouted to say that the girl who was just brought had died 2 months ago. And before Nori could understand what they were saying, the girl from behind quietly apologized and then attacked her from behind, threw it at her neck and blood splattered around. It seemed she even instantly bit off a piece of flesh. Koji became worried. He returned, but his eyesight was very weak, and in a moment his condition worsened, and he fell to the ground, coughing and spitting out blood. He remembered how he approached that woman to comfort her, and it was his fault that everything ended that way. Tears were in his eyes. He thought he had caused Nori's fall and realized that soon the couple along with him would perish. When the girl came closer, he heard her apologizing and asking him to run away from her. Still, her body was approaching the boy with the intention to eat him. When Koji saw her face, he noticed tears standing in her eyes and rolling down because she was suffering from intense pain and horror. However, her body itself desired to eat. Her face at that moment looked quite seductive, but before she could approach Koji, someone grabbed her from behind. It turned out that Nori was completely fine and, as a goddess of plants, ready to deal with a particularly contagious person. This time another girl did not have time to understand the situation, and Nora performed a suplex, flipping her body in an arc, and suddenly pressed her face right into the ground. Attack! Thanks to this, she was even able to create an antidote in the air, and when the task was completed, she immediately rushed to Koji and took the antidote out of the bag, asked him to open his mouth and poured everything inside while he was still coughing and suffering from pain. She immediately made an incision. Blood gushed onto her body, and then she spat this blood on Koji, that he could drink a little. As soon as he drank, he felt better, and the mushrooms were also washed off his body, as if nothing had happened. Nori was very worried about him, but since others were also in bad condition, she approached the child and transfused her blood, because she still needed some time to find a possible solution. She informed the ELF couple that they would take a break and asked them to protect the membrane. The couple could not understand what she meant, so she decided to show them a practical example, and then in the middle of the conversation began making a wooden shield, hugging Koji, and soon, with his help, a bubble-like structure formed that covered them both. Oji was still hugging her, and she, with a seductive expression on her face, said that everything would be fine, ready to give her full enlightenment to protect him. Koji had almost completely lost his sight, and as he was slipping into unconsciousness, his brain was talking to itself, trying to understand what really happened, thinking about the infection and the girl's apology. When he turned back, he saw a small woman who was continuously crying out of guilt. The resemblance was the same as the elf woman he met in the village. The boy was moved by her tears, and he tried to comfort her. He assured her that he would find a way out of her suffering. It was then that he suddenly woke up and found himself in the cocoon he had been in. Nori created it herself. He did not see her at all, so he constantly searched for her and finally found her body hanging nearby. And with relief, because she was small, he understood that when the cocoon broke, they returned to the real world. Both began coughing. Koji felt as if the floor was bringing him home. Nori was still coughing constantly, but as soon as she saw him, her face lit up with joy when she saw that he had finally woken up, and he apologized for making her worry. They returned to the world of the living while resting and were glad that the repairs were finished. But what she saw next completely shocked her because they did not return from that world alone. But this time they were accompanied by the elf woman from before. She still had the same aura, and when Nori recognized her, he was displeased because she attacked him from behind, and he asked Koji to tie her up because fighting was not an option now. Koji calmed her down, and when he realized that spores were no longer being released, no more mutations occurred, and the girl was glad that she could do nothing there. At that moment she understood what she was saying and was ready to give her life for her actions because she knew that she was the one who killed everyone in the village. Her eyes and tears showed what she had to go through, doing everything herself, and all the blame lay on her own body. But it was still too much for a little girl, and when she was given water and bathed well, Koji wondered if she was happy because she ended up in another world, and many. It had already happened to her. Nori immediately apologized for bringing her from nowhere. And when Koji was explained that there was nothing to worry about because the infection had already been cured by her blood, what she forced her to drink last time when they were in that place that Koji was still trying to understand, to find out what happened when he was unconscious and saw that she was crying. He sat next to her to ask why all this happened. He wanted to know what happened to her body and what was going on in the village. The girl was ready to give her life if they hated her so much, but with such a face they would not kill her. They just wanted to find out the reason. The girl explained that at first she was a fungus that parasitized creatures, infecting them with its spores and sucking nutrients from them. And time passed, and she didn't even notice how she learned to mutate into a creature that absorbs nutrients. Suddenly she came across the body of a child buried in the forest when her friends left her. The smell of Bodhi was quite tasty for a mutant like her. When the elf disappeared, she took root above the grave and began absorbing that Bodhi, through which she evolved and, having absorbed nutrients from the child Bodhi, gained all memories and intellect. The taste of human nourishment was much more delicious, so she immediately decided to head to the village with her memories, because she could not forget the taste of elves. Although she was walking, the childhood memories did not give her peace to stop. However, her hunger outweighed everything else, and so she ended up in the village. All this happened because of her, as she fed on some people, and this led to even greater human losses. She was the one who caused the entire infection and lured others into the trap, but in reality, they were just her food and gathered nearby every time she was hungry. She was the source of the infection and could not stop herself, but there was also a downside, because the more people she ate, the more memories awakened in her. Even when she tried to endure, the infected came to suck new nutrients. In simple terms, she was going through hell at that moment, and the memories could not be absorbed at all, no matter what happened in the village. She could not push the thought into her consciousness that she wanted to eat Koji, but she was still hungry. Therefore, he decided to help her with ordinary food, which could work just as needed. He immediately prepared something in the oven and served it to her, asking her to taste it. As soon as she bit the first piece, her face shone with pleasure, because it was the first time she tasted something so delicious. The first bite made her realize what she had done, but she had her own explanation. Fear prevailed, and she was not ready to die. She, with tears, begged not to take her life. Nori, like a girl, was completely immersed in the story and considered it a nightmare. When the last day finally ended, Koji had to return to the office after everything he had experienced the day before, because that's the life of a corporate worker. He planned to return home on time or earlier because he had something to do. When everything was finally supposed to end and his shift was about to. In the end, he got up from the table to leave when the boss suddenly called him and said that all the papers that had arrived earlier needed to be corrected and explained why it had not been done yet. This time, when Koji said he would do everything he could, his words sounded heavy and harsh, and he even said he had to leave earlier. However, this time the boss could not object. He immediately rushed to the parking lot, got into the car, and drove home. He was worried about the child and Nori and wondered if they were okay. While riding, he noticed both of them walking near the place, and realizing something was wrong, he stopped the car, secretly brought them inside, and gave a sign to the person outside who was kidnapping them. Hoji was not at all pleased that they went out without informing anyone, but the girl simply greeted him on his return, and it changed the whole atmosphere. Nori apologized that she was the one who took her out and called her Chiki, a nickname she gave her as a short name, Much. The name meant happiness in one language. Koji liked this name because it was easy to pronounce and had a good meaning, which made Chiki smile and a blush appear on her cheeks. He wanted to teach them not to go out just like that without information, because a few unpleasant surprises might be waiting. Nori explained that they actually went out to have dinner and buy groceries. They were just worried that Koji might also be late at work, and they were not ready to be bored at home all the time. But Koji knew that they needed to do something with her clothes before going to the grocery store. She was stopped by one of the clothing stores, and since the dress was noticeable, she had to change into something from their world. She was offered to buy anything in this place, and she wanted to wear what Koji liked. So when he pointed to an item, she decided to just try it on because nothing else fit her. When the girl changed, she felt a little embarrassed to go out immediately. But as soon as she stepped out, the clothes looked wonderful and fantastic, so they finally bought a lot of such items in a bag. Returning home at night, he was cooking dinner well. Both girls were bathing. After they returned, it was finally time when the rice was prepared. They were going to enjoy a wonderful dinner. Koji was eating with chopsticks, and the little girl also wanted to have it. And since she did not know how, she asked the boy to teach her. Koji immediately went outside to bring another pair of chopsticks, and then began teaching her, holding her hand from behind, how to use them. The surroundings seemed suspicious to Nori, but she was busy drinking. After recovering a bit, Chiki was already easily using the chopsticks, so she took a piece with the chopsticks and handed it to Koji with her own hand, because Nori said he would like it. Nori was completely absorbed in alcohol, and knew she could really act like that. She even told me that how their family is growing now brings them some pleasure, and Koji also thought that cute girls are the most interesting part. He even offered the little girl to live there as long as she wanted, because he would take care of everything, and she wouldn't have to worry. These words from the village calmed her again, and with happy tears she accepted the offer, constantly whispering the word family, seeing her wife. When Koji was sleeping, Nori was nearby in a small blanket, and he was thinking about what he really experienced that day, as a lot had happened. Suddenly he heard someone's voice asking for his hand, and he himself was not resting at all. And in the next moment someone grabbed Koji's hand, and it turned out it was Chiki herself who brought the chicken right to her chest. Because the chicken was not used to it at all. She sounded very seductive and was ready to allow him everything he desired, not being shy for a moment, and Koji lost his head because he did not expect this at all, and she was doing it to thank him for what he had done. And as the intensity gradually increased, she even took off her top, sitting on top of Koji, ready to give him everything he wanted. It was quite attractive now that he found himself in such a situation. But since she was doing nothing at all, she assumed he was not in the mood, and Koji explained that it was nothing like that. And she knew how it was done because memories were passed down from generation to generation. She remembered how last time her grandmother grabbed the eldest son of the village head for this. Although Koji wanted to learn a little more, he was not ready for it. Then a strange thing happened. Nori had already woken up and was drooling, and Chiki explained that it was her idea. Although Nori said all this, she did not interrupt and turned to the other side. Meanwhile, the girl explained that she did not want him to leave her and was ready to do anything to be with him. Koji understood what the little girl was really worried about, so he gently stroked her head and said she should not worry because no matter what happened, she would not be abandoned, and they would be together forever. Nori considered him a playboy, but Koji immediately denied it, and he was glad to receive this assurance because she wanted him to be interested in her, and was ready to do anything for it. Everything was going well. She was immediately told to change into pajamas because as soon as they fell asleep, they would return to the previous world, and the same thing happened as when they slept. He returned to the world where the cocoon had already opened, and a pair of elves were still standing nearby to take care of him. The couple was very worried, embarrassed by what had happened, and concerned about his well-being because he disappeared and reappeared after some time. A male elf stepped forward and pointed at the lady. He asked again what she was doing there, because that was the cause of everything and she could be infected. Koji immediately stood his ground and said that the girl was perfectly fine and there was nothing to worry about. But the pair of elves did not want to back down because fear was still visible on them. Chiki was still constantly apologizing because everyone was afraid that she might be killed due to anger. When it calmed down a bit, Koji found a way to get them to explain what had just happened. Then she called Nori and whispered in her ear, stepped in front of the pair and said that she was the one who healed her and would not attack anyone. And when things became clearer, added that the girl was healed by the divine influence in her blood. However, the male elf still could not understand what had happened because the girl had been dead for 2 months. Nori did not know what to say and tried to divert the conversation, saying that there might be some complicated circumstances in this part. While they were still looking for an answer to this, they saw people coming from the forest, and it turned out to be a whole horde of elves approaching. Previously, it was related to Nori's magic. And when everyone gathered, the male elf became even more worried because earlier, when he saw them, each one was infected. But they explained that they now felt good and had completely recovered. He raised his finger at Chiki again. She admitted that she caused all the infection, and when she lost her power, all the others recovered. At that moment, the elves did not hate Chiki because during the infection, they saw what the girl had gone through. And everyone understood this. The elf man was not yet ready to accept it, because such a thing could happen again in the future, when they would have to face the same regarding their children. Although one of the infected tried to explain what had just happened to her, another did not hear at all and hit the small woman with his chest, calling her a monster. As soon as the blow was dealt, all three could do nothing. But Koji stood in front of her and took the blow right in the face, while the other elves tried to restrain his movements. Koji realized that what they were talking about was a split consciousness when he saw her crying in one of the corners, and wiping a stain from the punch. He told them that the infected girl was not worth worrying about, and asked them to listen to her story. The elves understood that the boy was also infected with her fungal bacteria. Then he turned to Chiki and said that they were not going to do anything to her. They knew that what had happened and how the infection spread was not her fault, because she suffered more than they did while living with memories of everyone. The elf man, however, was still not ready to accept her, because in his eyes she was still a monster that needed to be destroyed immediately. Although they hated her a little, they were not going to take revenge, but were looking for a solution. The couple argued a little with the woman, trying to convince her husband that they should not worry because the girl was already scared. Chiki cried and hugged Koji, and he tried to calm her down and apologized, telling her that they didn't need to think much because he would take care of her, and that would solve the problem. It was one of the most peaceful ways to settle the matter, and after that, the elven peasants decided to return home, helping the one they kept in the forest when those guys left. They asked the man to return to the port because it was already getting dark. On the way back, as they walked, the story continued to unfold. He understood by her steps that Chiki was still a little unwell and wondered if she was okay. They decided to rest a bit. Chiki was managing, and Koji at that moment couldn't figure out how to fix the mistake and couldn't find the right words to call it a decision. Nori decided to cheer her up by saying that what had passed was beyond their control and asked to live happily now. Being sad wouldn't solve anything. Her feelings wouldn't change at all, so it was not worth thinking about it anymore. At that moment, she decided to create 2 chairs and told them that they should live each day, right and happily. She asked both to sit down. When Koji together with Chiki joined her, they realized that it was quite comfortable here. However, it was not just a place for rest, because Nori had other plans. She called them both passengers through a wooden microphone and informed them that they were about to take off. At that moment, Norris hens lifted them both into the air, protected by a seatbelt. The place was very high, so she made a small microphone that carried her voice to Koji's ears so they could look at the place above. When the two of them looked into the dark sky, many beautiful stars were visible. It was pleasant to the eyes. Then she told the girl something important, that from now on they would live and enjoy the happy life they should have had earlier. This pleased Chiki, and since then she was ready to live happily. Nori, like a goddess, did not allow them to step on the floor and asked them to stay while she ran to take them both to the port. All these events were observed by someone in a frame. When everything changed, one of the beastly women of the group handled a large whale herself and solved the illness problem. She really liked Koji, who had a pleasant facial expression, and at that moment her balls looked very impressive. She was bathing in the tavern and wanted to find out what had happened there. In her estimation, she would meet them soon. And when she changed into her clothes, she looked like a witch with a stick in her hand. The end. The next morning, Chiki woke Koji, who was dozing on the pier. But the bed was completely different. Nori was lying next to him, completely naked, and she did it on purpose. He thought Koji would be happy if he woke up like that, but he was shy and asked to get dressed. They were at the stage of reconstructing the mermaid city in the country where giants appeared. Karna also informed them that there were rumors about their presence. However, no one knew the exact location. They only knew it was an eastern country. Karna did not help and apologized for it. But just then Nora rushed in swiftly and putting a whole block back in place, told them that they would go east to learn about other insects that had spread while she was excited. The cheeky Kane ran to him when he prepared breakfast, which she received from the mermaid. When she extended it, others recognized her because their already well-known story about who she was and how they met in the village was unraveled. Chiki responded affectionately, and they had already decided that after breakfast they would head east. When Koji started eating, he realized that the food he was eating was from the great Taurus, a giant whale, and despite many days having passed, it remained fresh. Karna explained that the meat was not rotten at all, and when Koji understood that this was abnormal, he looked at Nori. She turned away and did not want to correct that mistake, and he had no response to it. But Chiki was able to feel a bit of magic and blessing in it, while Karna did not want to know what had happened at all. And the reason was what she paid attention to, because that could revive the town. Koji thought that such an event would make this place touristy, and knew that the city's restoration could succeed. Karna asked them to continue on their path in solving world problems. He told them that on the way east they could stop by one of the springs and gather useful information from there. She took out a pouch and handed it to Koji, telling him that it was world currency and might be needed for them to survive. It was a bit awkward to take money for such help. The mermaid willingly gave it because thanks to it their lives were saved. And since it was a well-deserved reward, Koji accepted it and decided to repay. His relationships with others were such that he could be called a dependent. It was truly a great compliment. After lunch, Karna decided to see them off. They were already packed with food and folded. She wished them to be careful. They were going to set out for the eastern lands, where a giant had appeared, and all three looked quite satisfied. Koji also became interested in that end she was talking about, because he had never heard what it looks like in another world. The sight of all the drills working there became a motivation for Nate. When they were going there, they had already walked a bit, and were looking for an inn that could be somewhere nearby. At that moment, Koji realized he did not know the value of money here, so Nori decided to explain it through her memory about health. And the explanations could be done during the walk, and it was a great idea. In fact, in that world there were 7 types of coins, among which were gold, silver, and copper. And if all this is converted into yen, it comes to about 32,000. Koji was not satisfied with this, and he was just about to check the price. Nori told him that the tavern was already visible, and they would stay there for the night. They wanted to get inside together. The information suddenly spread. They were fascinated when they saw his possessions. And then he realized that this place was not ordinary, but clearly connected with weapons. Guma, the name of a place north of Saitama Prefecture, where Koji lives and where Nora used to visit during her student years, being in heaven. Koji had extraordinary memories from there, especially about the food and references, and at that moment he was ready to face it. Even if it was a mistake, the first step was immediately, when they entered, to check what was inside. They discovered that someone had been attacked and magically thrown out from there, and stunned. They did not manage to understand it. They noticed that the person was hiding something dangerous inside, like a sword. When the witch came out, she whispered that the person who was hiding nearby and trying to cause trouble in that sacred gunma was abandoned. When she noticed that there were other guests waiting to enter while Nori was on guard, she explained that the conditions changed depending on the need. Then she said that the man was going to rob the mermaid city when a giant whale would swallow them all, and his intentions were bad, so she took charge of cleaning up the mess. Koji could not understand what those words meant, and clarified that they were not some kind of... He had not yet managed to explain when the brilliant sorceress said she would not let any thief or person with bad behavior into that tavern. After a brief polite conversation and a bright smile, she immediately asked everyone to come inside and booked accommodation for 3 people, which cost 1 small gold coin and 1 large copper coin, which in Japan amounts to 10,500 yen. When those people went inside, the witch began to apologize. She told them that she supposedly had already foreseen the meeting with them in her divinations about the future, but she herself was not sure about it, and the guys simply confirmed with relief that they were not bandits. Nori was interested in the part about divination, so the witch said that she was engaged in gathering information and, thanks to magic, knew about such people, especially when it came to the conquest of the Great Tarask and helping the elven village solve the problem. Koji was surprised, and she explained that those she boasted about back then were bandits who sailed into the area when she was going to the port, using her old information, and people complained about it in a completely different way. Those guys were waiting for the next procedure, where she explained that she was the guardian of that tavern. It was filled with people of different races who were having a good time at that moment. When they left their luggage at the registration desk, it seemed to them that the local amenities were not so much a drawback as something that reminded Koji of his own memories of this place. They were all very hungry after the journey, so they decided to go to the dining table, where the witch was at that moment. They were served delicious dishes that they had not tried for a long time. The witch thanked them for allowing her to sit at the table, although she had not asked. However, those guys were little interested in this conversation because they were praying to the gods before the meal, and Koji, having learned that the girl traded information, immediately asked her to tell something about the giants that appeared in the eastern country. She did not know much about it but was in contact with a person who had information about the city. When he further inquired about it, she immediately asked for a silver coin because that was her price. As soon as she was given it, she detailed everything that was included in her sale, namely healing services or basic knowledge of magic, and the price for this information reached 5 copper coins. There was also a hug from her as a free gift. It was very strange, and Koji was already about to refuse, but Chiki loudly objected. Hugging Koji, she explained that she herself would have this right, and Nori decided to join the scene, which Koji did not expect. The witch had no idea, and Chiki was quite mischievous, so she asked her to lower the price, knowing that she herself had already made a scene at the entrance. And so they were given a discount of 1 copper coin. The amount became 4. She really knew how to manage the household budget. When they handed her 4 copper coins, they were told that the city was located east of that place, but it was not an ordinary city. She told them that she would conduct a practical demonstration because it was already evening, and asked them to gather in the room after dinner. Winking, she told them that seeing it was much better than hearing about it 100 times, because they had finally finished. They went to the hotel room where they were called, and they were given binoculars. What Koji was using at that moment allowed him to see the city of Kazo, which hovered above the ground. This place was considered the main tourist attraction of the city, and the island was quite beautiful, although the witch had never seen it with her own eyes. Those words caused a different excitement in the girls, and both showed it. They also needed to ask people if there were any other jobs, and since it was a tourist place in another world, Koji was also interested and asked her what information she had, and how much she could be trusted. There was a conversation that was not revealed at that time. However, after breakfast and obtaining the necessary information, they decided to take a hot bath. Koji wondered why the trip to the island cost the 3 of them 20 gold coins, and they found it hard to comprehend the price because earning that amount would take them an eternity. Nori tried to tell Koji to calm down and just enjoy the remaining time, as it was their rest period when they only needed to recover their strength. He understood everything, pushed all worries to the background, and enjoyed himself in another world, when he suddenly heard something from the other side of the fungal section. There was some noise. Chiki was completely fascinated by the size of the balls, and Nori meanwhile was praising them contentedly. And Koji realized that another group, not theirs, was really having a good time. He wanted to peek, but then got confused because of the matter with the 20 gold coins. At that moment, a young muscular man approached from behind, introduced himself as Kelvin, and said he had a job for him. Koji became interested, and just then a crocodile-like creature sneaked up from behind and surrounded him, calling him a support in its trouble, and he hadn't yet managed to understand what had happened. He found himself in the middle of a bunch of naked muscular men. The way those guys offered him a job still looked like he was being forced. He asked what exactly the job would be to be there. They explained that his only request was to kill a dragon for them, and although the girls on the other side didn't know what was happening, Koji saw his death right before his eyes. When they were already about to leave the inn, the witch apologized for everything and asked him for money. But it was necessary because she already had a contract there. Even Koji understood that he could not take her away just for his own benefit. The witch still made him an offer and said that the spirits would support him if he returned without learning more. Calvin had called him earlier to celebrate the departure they planned for the next day. Koji told them that they were saviors who saved the mermaid city from the whale, but those guys were not ready to accept it, and Nori and the others did not even try to convince them. 2 days after the request, they had already set out for the mountain. Many people followed them, although it was not an official request and they had their own motives, and he kept going. The boy called him a savior and thought he would handle everything. Nori saw nothing wrong with going to work because she wanted to correct the mistake while they could work. As soon as they reached a certain place on the mountain, a strange noise sounded, and Kelvin immediately asked everyone to stay away, because the stones finally started to move. Nori protected Chiki because she thought it could provoke her old injury, and although it was considered an easy matter, it actually was not. The dragon standing before them at that moment was not something they could easily handle. The target was not an ordinary but a strong dragon standing before them. Before they could figure out how to find a way out and escape, the dragon immediately attacked them, and this made them realize that numbers could not overpower it. Kelvin immediately asked everyone to retreat because it was their only way to develop, but Nori was not embarrassed at all. She asked everyone to retreat because she wanted to handle everything herself. She immediately began to change her appearance and become like a goddess. It was covered with trees and other vegetation, and she told them that she would find a way to get out and defeat it. She was very exalted because she had already received divine energy from Koji, and in the rocky terrain, she could manifest much more power. When the dragon realized that an enemy stood before it, one it had to fight, a stone breath immediately attacked her, but she simply deflected it with magic and said that it actually would not work. This was only the beginning, because she had already planned further steps even before the dragon could respond. She attacked from under the roots and hit him right in the face with an uppercut. When the stone dragon staggered, she found a chance to break through with one burst. She attacked with all her mind, but none of the marks could pierce his body. Knowing that Bodhi was too strong, it was difficult to find a way out. Instead, Kelvin's subordinates praised and encouraged the girl, thinking she would manage. But it worked differently because the dragon attracted the attention of these guys. Turning away from this real enemy it faced at that moment, the dragon attacked both of them with stone breath, but they could not respond. Again, Koji stepped forward and covered everyone with her magic, so the breath did not reach those it was aimed at. And when she managed to save the comrades attacked by the monster, she realized that the monster had already changed its target. She wanted to learn more so much that she lost her vigilance. The dragon took advantage of this and instantly attacked her with its tail from the right, hitting hard. Her sudden strike drove her into the mountains. The attack was very strong, shook the woman, and caused bleeding. When her friends decided to approach to check if she was okay, she almost fell, and Koji caught her again, asking her to pull herself together. Nori realized that the dragon was actually very fast, although it looked different, and Koji was hugging her. He told her to absorb as much divine power as possible to heal the wound. Meanwhile, Chiki stood opposite the dragon, and the shadow completely covered her. With the little courage she had, she decided to stand against it. Although she looked like just a pebble before him, she knew that if this continued for some time, then everything would repeat just like last time in the village, and she would be left alone. She remembered the words she heard in the tavern, where the witch told her that she had enough talent. Even Nori remembered that Chiki could not transmit any magic from flesh, but she still managed to. Both wanted her to learn new techniques that would be much better in the future, and Chiki decided to do it despite the difficulties and the fact that it could trouble her. Because it was useful for Koji. As instructed, she decided to focus all her strength and call upon the voices of the spirits. On the very first attempt, she was able to swallow a lot, and Nori was surprised by her abilities, because the child was very talented. So Nori began to prompt her and asked her to repeat how she did it. She praised her amazing talent and said that her abilities were much higher. So to get the necessary magic, the easiest way was to pray. Nori explained that the stronger the power, the stronger the magic appears at that very moment. Chiki tried to perform the technique, focusing all her attention on prayer to protect her friends from everything. When the dragon tried to attack, she immediately called the spirits and struck the dragon with her palm. It was a water spirit that she summoned, and it poured a powerful stream of water on that dragon. Her friends also could not understand how the girl at that moment was driving it away with boiling water, while Nori was meanwhile looking for an opportunity, which she got after Chiki's boiling water made holes to remove the dragon's tough skin. She also learned a lot, so she decided to move on, while Koji was still worried about her body. She returned to reassure him that everything was fine and there was nothing to worry about. So Koji decided to help her by hugging her from behind. They told Chiki to step back while she was still pouring water. While she was following the command, they concentrated all their strength, and Nori shouted to open the passage. At the right moment, the puncture she made with her roots pierced the thick skin of the dragon, and it roared in pain. Everyone, including them, was stunned by how unexpectedly it happened. They realized that what they had said from the very beginning about having defeated the great Tarask themselves was not a joke. At that moment, they were able to see what true friendship looks like, and how those people really knew what they were doing. They had a different excitement because they managed to pass another level of the bug, and with that, they shouted with joy because they completed the task of conquering the stone dragon. Suddenly, a foul smell rose from the dragon's body and something unexpected fell out, which was pitiful, and at the same time harmful. It was some kind of lump, quite bright and shiny, and Koji thought it was a stone. But before he could realize, those guys who were earlier rushed at them and hugged Koji, praising their spirit and congratulating them on the conquest. They rejoiced that the rumors about the stone dragon that feeds on stones turned out to be true, and then showed them that what stood before them was not just trash, but valuable ores, a pile of gems and gold. And then they understood the real reason why they wanted to conquer it. Koji wanted to share the supplies among everyone, and Kelvin, a good man, turned around and said that they themselves defeated the monster. So everything belongs to them, and no one should get even a crumb. Koji refused to tell them that this achievement was not only their contribution, because he could not find the answer. Since those guys stood their ground, he turned to Nori, who explained that half of the reward would be given to the village that suffered from the dragon for restoration, and the rest would be divided equally among themselves without further discussion. Still, Koji was glad for the achievement gained, because everyone risked their lives, so the results should be distributed equally. These were the true words of the goddess, and those present at the party were impressed by this. At night they decided to camp nearby, and while some rested, 3 friends sat by the fire and praised the fight. At this time the lady was completely drunk, and her divine power was recovering. Chiki apologized for not using magic earlier. Nori considered it a blessing that magic was used, and Koji did not know how she did it, because he had never seen her practice it. As it turned out, it was from the tavern, where he recalled that even the witch had spoken about it earlier when she was all dressed up, and Chiki was dissatisfied. They had to pay some money to get the information, but for Koji it was not a problem. He raised a toast in their honor for the help. Chiki was delighted with such praise, but then Nori reminded them of the mistake. It was the same target in the city as before, and this time their lives were again in danger, because a little girl was just sipping from her glass and she was quite uncomfortable, and called the drink coffee. She believed it was more valued for its aroma. Koji then served her regular coffee, not black, although she had never drunk it. It seemed much more calming and relaxing when they were just in the middle of it. Kelvin ran up and asked Koji about the drink. It was insanely good. He wanted to put that thing up for sale in the city. It would instantly take off, and they could earn a lot. He was interested. Someone wanted to know about the origin of that thing, but Koji could not talk about another world, and Kelvin looked even more interested. So he was ready to buy from him wholesale, without revealing information, to then sell and earn. And even Koji understood that they needed money to survive and decided to enter into discussion with friends to reach a conclusion, to enter the tent. Nori heard all this and suggested using her power to grow coffee, like coffee farmers do. She looked at the wealth that would give them money for the journey. But the only problem that stopped the idea was that they initially did not know how to do it. Chiki came to help, and told them that there was a faster way. Namely, they could handle the demand if they brought it from another world and sold it to him. The idea was not bad, but Nori was not very happy because she knew that Chiki had a better idea against her idea. They called it a big coffee-selling operation because they agreed to everything he wanted. Calvin was very happy that after descending the mountain he could finally start the business. But Koji said to wait because it would take him quite some time. And Calvin wanted to choose the best delivery time. And while Koji was just thinking, signs of his return appeared out of nowhere. And at first it surprised Kelvin. He came back, but Koji couldn't tell anything, and couldn't return to the real world even after fixing the mistake. This time he again felt heavy and seemed to have brought an unexpected companion again. This time Kelvin was transferred against his will. And Nori started explaining again, as she always did when a guest came. When the scene ended, Koji realized it was already morning, and it was time to hurry back to the corporate world, where he would have to work hard to survive. And just at that moment when he was rushing, one of his colleagues called him, who told him something that the people in the background could not understand. At that very second he shuddered and screamed because of the news he did not expect at all. And when the call was cut off, Nora ran to find out what really happened. The boy with a sad expressionless face explained that his company had gone bankrupt, and this news shocked everyone who was sitting there. This also did not clarify that Koji was now out of work, but those guys could not understand the meaning of the words they kept using. We remember the bankruptcy announcement on the office door, where it was written about the company's closure, but the reason was not named, and the boss could not talk about it. He had been going there as long as he could remember. But this time he did not back down at all, because he had already moved into the desired world. After some time he returned home. Everyone greeted him with smiles, and he announced the final news that the bankruptcy was indeed confirmed, and there was nothing to hide. Nori was looking for a better option because the guy had already invested a lot of time and received little, and he was glad that they still had plenty of time to correct mistakes. Nori sincerely called his work a salvation. He believed he had to keep working because she had something on which his future depended. It was a shock for him, and he wanted to learn more, but she decided not to speak. Kelvin was not interested in such conversations. He stepped forward to ask him to move on to what they talked about yesterday, and since everything was decided, they decided to return to the city after stocking up on coffee for the trip. For the second time he got into the car, and they went outside to get to the supermarket. Kelvin was stunned by the buildings and the mechanism. Koji explained that the car ran on gasoline, which drove the wheels, and it went very fast. He explained that everything in that world was quite unusual compared to what they had in Utopia. And he also had to change to attract the attention of more people. So they took him to the store, and Koji meanwhile went into the jewelry shop. He went to the market store to get money from there, and after selling the jewelry, he bought a large batch of goods there, which was good luck. Since there was enough money for a mountain of coffee, they decided to hurry. Calvin was interested in this thing, but all those guys understood that in his current state, they obviously could not take him directly to the shopping center. They decided to take him by escalator to a store in the shopping center, and this surprised him. Then they dressed him in ordinary clothes of that country. The outfit looked good, and the girls looked at others and they liked it. As always, it decided to go to a restaurant to eat, and Kelvin enjoyed the taste of the food he was eating. He liked everything, even pork. And Nori, as always, tried to eat as much as possible. Finally, they reached the store at the food market, where everything was stacked and piled up, and Callan was surprised that there were covered markets in that country. He also noticed the sauce he had just tried, instead of having more time to travel the country when they were returning for supplies. He knew he could not stay in one place in Utopia, but when he told him about it, he suggested using the box that he used together with a colleague. Koji explained that the thing was only in that country. This surprised him a lot, so he paid out of his own pocket, telling them that they would need it at the meeting. Actually, the phones arrived, and two sat in the back with a ring, and each made a demonstration, so they understood how it worked. Kelvin was glad to have found something that could keep them connected for a long time, even in Utopia. And when it was brought again, the conversation finally ended. Nori did not like that the guy was importing magical items into the country at all. She asked Koji not to use such materials in that world, because if there was a commotion there, the management would scold her. And Nori knew that the leadership sees everything and knows what is happening in the other world, and this could lead to her suspension from work and return back. Callan told her that she meant that it was necessary not to use it several times and to find out exactly what the requirements were, including the sauce. When they left, market representatives decided to make a purchase. They bought a lot of goods. They went back and forth several times to deliver materials to the apartment, and it dragged on until evening, so they decided to have sukiyaki for dinner, which looked wonderful. At first there were 3 people, then 4, and they enjoyed the feast. After that, they went out to the balcony and talked. Nori said that Chiki also seemed to be enjoying the moment. OG understood that they now had enough coffee, and Calvin could also come to Heavenly City, because a little information was reassuring. He was curious about what had already been restored in Utopia, because although fixing bugs was fun, he wanted a concrete example of how it brought satisfaction. Nori knew that this could only be done when the inspection began in the heavens. But there was one problem. From her tone, it was clear that no one would worry if she solved the problem herself. But if she returned to the heavens for advice, they might consider replacing her and change her appointment. Another god would take her place. And although Nori knew this was right, she said she wanted to take care of Koji herself. He waited until the very end and then apologized for not suggesting this earlier. Koji, seeing her in tears, understood what the girl meant by this. He could also do without explanations, because it was his responsibility to go with them to the very end. She was overcome with excitement, and she ran up to him because of what he had done. The next day there would definitely be a lot to do, so they decided to go inside and rest, as happened when they returned to Utopia. Koji was carrying a huge luggage stuffed with all kinds of materials that they were going to descend from the mountain, and at that moment he could not lower the car. Kelvin wanted to do this job for him, but Koji decided to do everything himself. While Chiki was drinking water from her fingers, when they added them, they heard a voice that sounded familiar, and it turned out that the witch had returned on a broomstick. She descended and praised the boys for being able to defeat the stone dragon on their own. Her security contract had already ended, so she could join them and decided to ascend to the Sky City. Someone expressed a desire to join, and Koji was simply glad to have another comrade he could rely on without hesitation, so they decided to head to the Sky City as planned, which was visible from there. Back in the city, in one of the castles, a woman came and called Bella in an official tone. Someone tried to tell her that if this continued, the city would inevitably fall, but Bella already knew this. She stepped back to the table, stood and looked out the window, where the unrest on the island had reached its peak, and this was considered a curse. During the visit, they were in an elevator that took them directly into the city, and the sky seemed quite cheerful as the elevator rose higher and higher. Kelvin was glad that those guys had gotten down to business. Again, Nori helped. She easily delivered them there with magic, and Koji wanted to know the real reason why the witch decided to come to the city, and she explained that her job was to sell information, and she also liked their company, which was more important to her. They talked for dozens of minutes, and finally they reached the top of the Heavenly City, where they were met by a fairy-like creature. Koji wanted to find out the current state of that place, and the closer he got, the stronger his curiosity grew. Leaving the elevated camp, Koji held his breath at the view that opened before him. The city looked wonderful and turned out to be even better than they had heard. Meanwhile, the witch was impressed by the landscape. Kelvin was the only one who had visited this place several times before, and told them that the city was quite ordinary, but the view was better from there. The information was very impressive, and when Nori looked at Koji, he realized he needed to correct the mistake and decided to move further through the city, while Chiki was unconscious due to the elevator and no longer enjoyed it. When they reached the market beyond the checkpoint, the woman they had seen earlier was trying the coffee and said it was tasty, and Koji explained that he was here to sell it, and there was nothing dangerous about it. That woman recognized Koji as a representative of everything, and whispered in his ear to get some coffee for free, which would have allowed him to enter the city without problems, or he would have had to wait at least half a day. Although it sounded illegal, Koji agreed to give a sample because he had 23 packets. They could make a profit in any case. He understood this and decided not to refuse. After paying for the coffee, they issued a permit to stay on the island, and all of them went inside under her salute, as if they had been invited earlier. Minori was worried that other people were waiting while they were going inside, but Koji did not want to talk about the bribe he gave her to make it possible. Alvin, on the other hand, realized that he had handed over several samples that allowed them to enter, and asked Nori about it. Koji decided to explain that it was the first time something was being imported into the country. They needed a sample, and those people were ready to return it as an apology. He was glad he did not lie, and Nori was pleased that he explained. And she thought they were just lucky and nothing bad happened. Those guys entered the city and were met by a guard near the main gates. As soon as they arrived there, it turned out that there were a lot of people, and the atmosphere in the town was quite pleasant and friendly compared to other places. Shopkeepers tried to sell as many souvenirs as possible, and Nori also wanted to buy something. Koji decided to take a walk after they found a place to stay. Shiki even called her a glutton. She always tries to find opportunities to travel, but seeing the food stalls on site, it seemed that she was hungry too. Blushing a little, she decided to wipe her saliva, but it looked like those guys were just joking. She felt quite embarrassed. 3 women talked a little and quarreled, and it looked cute. Later during the walk, they decided to enter a jewelry store, where the merchant examined the material and offered 28 gold coins for the jewel. Nori was satisfied with the price. Koji realized that even if they deducted Kelvin's share, they would have enough money to pay for the tickets bought in advance, so there would be no further problems. That day, the place was Rainbow Wings. For a group of 5 people and 2 horses, they decided to accommodate them in 2 rooms, one for 2 men, the other for 3 women. They were also ready to prepare an extra bed for the child, but Chiki could not understand. But when they pointed at her, it seemed that she was the only one, and she pouted again in anger. When they entered the room, Koji rested and realized that it was much better than living in a tent, and Calvin decided to prepare for the next day before dinner. He fully told him about his plan. His plan was to fix the errors in Sky City too. Koji could not notice any specific errors there. Even Kelvin could not recall anything strange during the last visit. He was glad that there were no bugs, and this time they could truly explore the utopia. Just then a knock was heard at the gate, so Koji went and opened it. They found that the same girl was present, and this time she came with a guest, a beautiful woman named Bella, who was a representative of the city. Koji was not expecting a guest at that moment. It was visible on her face, and she asked for an explanation immediately. She was interested in the powder, which she called coffee, and she was very happy. Since there was a slight addiction from it, she decided to detain the representative for selling a substance that causes addiction. It happened quite harshly and suddenly, and within a few minutes Koji was behind bars. At the hotel, Kelvin immediately ran to the girls' room to say that Koji was already detained, and this shocked Nori, who added that the island representative came into the room and caused a quarrel over the coffee given at the checkpoint. The witch decided to do something to get him out of there, because they did not want their friend to be arrested because of this. All 4 immediately decided to break in and angrily return their master. Again in the headquarters, in the interrogation room, Koji loudly demanded explanations because he was not allowed to go outside, although he had successfully passed the exam. They explained that they had prepared a plan to correct the oversight, and told him that although bringing drugs was punishable by death, they had a proposal on how to avoid this. If he did not want to just leave, he asked about it and found out that the girl was interested in where it was located, and the seller from whom they bought the coffee. It was quite awkward because Koji really could not talk about another world, and her words sounded as if she was looking for a business plan through it. In fact, there was nothing bad there, and he even asked why. Knowing that it was considered a mildly addictive drug, they wanted to confiscate even more this time. He was too modest to speak further. Her companion told him that they needed to be decisive and tell everything honestly, and those words appeared out of nowhere. She began to cry and scream constantly. Apologizing for what she had done, she frightened Koji. He even inquired what it all meant, and found out that the girl was really out of money and had previously been in great need of funds. Before he could take another step, the door to the interrogation room was magically broken down, and Nori entered, considering the person sitting in front of him guilty and was about to attack. Koji asked what had happened, but even he did not know, because the girl was still crying and did not say a word. When things calmed down a bit, they decided to move to the conference room, where everyone sat around a round table. OG learned that the anomaly of the Heavenly Island was causing the city's financial collapse, and decided to simply resolve it. The place was lively due to tourists who came to visit, but this had been going on for the last 6 months. Due to an unexpected problem, they could not work, and the budget was quickly melting away. Then many reports came in about damages that needed urgent repairs because there was a tremor in the city and something was breaking. All this happened on another island where no one was present at the time. Since they had already relocated people from there to the main island, the cloud had completely engulfed that place. All this looked like a harsh plan calculated for the day when people were supposed to disappear from the island. Since the whole city lived off tourism, it was not kept only as a landscape. Externally, mountains and trees were used as materials for repairs, and Bella was still crying because she needed money, and labor costs had sharply increased now. Bella recalled how this happened due to the influence of her predecessors, who started the tourism business 5 years ago, and every month the council members always blamed her entirely, then calmed down a bit. She begged Koji to help them and inform the coffee supplier about it. But Koji instead understood that what was happening now was simply a mistake that needed to be corrected. He got to the root of the problem because it was not only about money, so he asked for permission to inspect the land. She found it hard to understand what he really meant, but Nori stepped forward and introduced herself as the goddess of cultivation, who was supposed to eliminate the anomaly. And they even gave examples of how they solved cases in the elf village and in the mermaid city. All this was said to gain the trust of that girl and act through her. Joy was noticeable on her face. It was clear that she truly felt that way because she saw them as the city's saviors. And Koji, together with the team, realized that they were really setting out on a mission now. And they were going to start investigating the problem on the island the next day. Bella was still thinking with tears that they really had come to help. The very next day, they got into a carriage to reach the celestial departure and arrival terminal. And from there, they could see what was happening with the city. Because it was completely covered with clouds called the Dragon's Nest, something under the influence of a mystery. Calvin noticed something strange in it and then told them that there were no rainbow koi there. They were considered giant fish that lived by eating rainbows, shining with the colors of the rainbow, and according to legend, those who saw them were lucky. Fortune. The woman added that since the celestial island got stuck in the clouds, no such creature had appeared, and the witch had never heard of them falling to the ground, so they must be there. They knew that to understand those words, they needed to break through the clouds to the heavenly island and inquire about the people heading there and the further path. Nori immediately whistled to call a bird, and a huge eagle appeared, on which they flew to the place. Nori called him a little bird, who had a strong lightning and seemed quite dangerous for Chiki. Koji wanted to take the opportunity to solve the problem but got confused. He explained that he would check it himself. The others agreed on the place and would meet later. Chiki, in any case, did not want to leave Koji behind and decided to go with him. Seeing their courage, even Kelvin was ready to take it on, because they would save his world and would not stand aside when the time came. He asked the boy for motivation to join the company as a companion on the journey, but not as a partner, and the witch was glad. She smiled and offered Koji to hire her because she could be useful when needed. Since everything was well planned, the Great Hawk was ready to transport them all in a cage. Under the lady's protection, the order was given that everyone was ready. The plan was this. They would fly on the Great Hawk, and Nori would grab the basket, using her magical powers to rise to the heavenly island. Later, the falcon would drop the basket from the sky and, deflecting lightning with reflection magic and using Nori's absorption power, they intended to get to the heavenly island. According to the plan, the Great Hawk was supposed to deliver them directly to the island, but due to the magical barrier, it became impossible to control it, so it was a desperate move. All this time, the woman prayed for the well-being of everyone. It seemed the plan suddenly changed because everyone felt an unexpected trouble, and they understood what was really happening. Bella saw the rainbow fish that were locked inside and, trapped, they could not get out. They realized that as soon as the ball fell, big problems would begin, because the magic of reflection would no longer work so well. But they still decided to follow the plan. And through the well told the lady to lower the basket, which they would pull, making efforts to get to the island. He, just like Nori, was delighted along with the three who did not back down at all when the plan was announced. Confident in herself, she ordered the Golden Hawk to execute the command. The ball fell very quickly, and everyone looked as if they had lost consciousness. Only Chiki and Nori woke up. They are interested in the condition of everyone else. When Koji came to, he saw that everyone survived and together reached the city in the sky. The island looked unbearably beautiful, and they remembered that all this happened thanks to the witch who reflected magic with her magic. She greatly valued this praise and was proud to be her student. It was time to start the investigation, so they asked the lady if she noticed anything unusual before the clouds covered the island, and learned that the most suspicious was the castle. Although there was a huge hole in the ground, they tried to understand what it was, and it was quite strange. The woman in glasses informed them that a huge metal doll was seen on the island, lying in different places, covered with moss, and had become a tourist attraction. At that moment, Kelvin interrupted and pointed at something. He informed them that the doll was now approaching from afar, and it had a rather unusual shape like an angry giant. They still believed it was an artifact, but the woman did not understand how it moved. As soon as the giant noticed those people, he immediately raised his hand and began attacking with arrows. Nori stepped forward to protect everyone, and then she blocked those arrows with plant magic. The time has come for the witch to step forward and play her role using magic, to crush that monster with lightning immediately, and it worked quite well. When the stone knight lay on the ground, they did not know that something was waiting to the right of him, and while they praised her for decisive actions, one of the other giants approached right to Chiki's side, and it caught her by surprise. She did not have time to do anything. Then everyone realized that the spell had to be spoken, because Kelvin would have a hard time reaching to protect her, and the monster was too close, So this time, Koji decided to approach and strike that monster right at the end. He shouted that he could do nothing about his cheeky girl, and she was embarrassed. Kelvin found an opportunity to deliver a blow that cut that monster in half. Worried if everyone was okay, Koji injured the right side of his arm while deflecting that blow. But he twisted everything, told them that everything was fine. The girl was okay. And while they tried to imagine that there were only 2 creatures approaching to attack them, Nori explained them their count was completely wrong, because many more were approaching from the front, so it was definitely more than 2. Koji understood that his bear strike would not help here, so he immediately asked the witch to take command. But she knew that considering her physical and mental strength, she could use magic only 5 or 6 times and would die. They did not quite understand what awaited them ahead. Those monsters had already taken positions and were preparing to shoot them with arrows. So, Nori stepped forward to protect those guys with her plant magic. The woman told them to flee to the city, where she knew a refuge, making sure they could do so. Nori held the plantation shield while everyone ran, asking them not to go ahead. The guards suddenly realized that they were trying to escape, so they decided to change tactics, and to fly ahead of them, which was very bad because at that moment they were in command. They thought they needed to do something else. Nori asked Koji to immediately transfer divine power from behind, and when the divine power was replenished, Nori did not use her magic to knock them all down at once. This time her magic survived it, causing more destruction than they expected. But that did not matter now, because during the commotion one of the giants found a way out and was preparing to attack them using magic. That monster, which Nori could not notice immediately, suddenly attacked, and Nori decided to put her body at risk to protect Koji. This time the damage turned out to be much greater than they expected. Oji was confused at that moment because of that move. The girl was crying from pain due to the sudden attack. She felt a little unwell because, even being a goddess, she could not take care of everyone. They were completely unprepared. There were still many monsters and they were attacking them, so the witch decided to play her role and use magic 5 or 6 times to protect them from these monsters. When they reached a place where they could hide, they decided to enter the tunnel, and Koji picked up the woman in his arms and ran as fast as possible to protect her from further harm. Calvin immediately slammed the door to make it safer. The witch immediately used lightning magic and sealed the gate with debris so that no monsters could enter inside. And the same thing happened because those giants simply stayed behind. Someone at the control room saw all this, someone who did not like that the entrance collapsed and they entered the castle from outside, because he called them invaders who were ravaging their lands, and warned that they would not be able to just escape. Inside the tunnel, both felt intense pain, and Koji healed the woman who suffered the most with his magical light, and was again ready to provide the divine power of absorption. However, the lady did not understand this at all and was unaware. It was quite awkward to refuse because they said the most effective way was to absorb divine power. At the moment, Koji found it hard to imagine this lady in such a context, and he was not ready for it. While he was still thinking about how to get out, Letty explained that a deep kitsch would work in the same situation to restore calm. Thinking it was a good and simple idea, he decided to try and immediately dived deeper, giving much deeper quiches and fully immersing in it. Meanwhile, Chiki did not like this. Calvin covered the girl's eyes so she would not see it. After some time, Nori fully recovered from the pain and was glad to have climbed one more step as an adult. She was the happiest because it happened to Koji. Chiki felt a little behind because she could not achieve this and was ready to discuss it later. Having passed a bit through the tunnel, they managed to slip into the castle by removing one of the tiles. When they reached it, they realized it was a hidden passage into the castle's interior and were ready to explore it further. Inside, they were once again met with something they did not expect. When they heard a voice, they turned around and saw an old man who was accompanying those monsters and was displeased that these people had invaded his kingdom, so he was ready to kill them immediately, and ordered those monsters to attack them again with arrows. It seemed that he was the one controlling them, but Nori wanted to know how that man stayed behind if everyone returned from the heavenly island to the mainland, and the only possibility was that he entered the island from the city, but that could not have happened because they had been watching around the clock since then. Moreover, the man called that island his country, and those guys did not react to that at all. Nori was ready to take command again, but Chiki wanted to play her role. This time she stepped forward and told them not to attack them because they had come only to check what had happened on the island. But it seemed that her friends were much more worried because she was not looking, and when Nori created a barrier to protect her from the arrows, she calmed her down. She told her that she wanted to discuss it with them. She cautiously stepped out of the shield, shocking the man, and once again told them that they were just here to find out what was happening on the island and would not cause any trouble. He was quite offended by the word island, and asked what year it was now. They did not know which era he was talking about. He explained that it must be an era that became widespread in this region many years ago. When they replied that it was 1,000 years more than their current time, because according to the pro-calendar, it was the year 282, and the calendar had already disappeared. That man finally understood the situation, and muttered that no one returned when the whole country was covered with moss. He mumbled to himself. Chiki was again not sure who this man was. Suddenly he called himself the king of the country, and everyone was shocked because they wanted additional explanations. He turned around and asked everyone to go with him to discuss a little more on the way to the conference hall. 2 guards accompanied them. Everyone sat at the table, and the man began to tell that he had rested for a long time, up to 2,000 years. But they did not understand anything, so they asked him to explain in detail because everything was very unclear, and he was supposed to be the reason for the appearance of clouds. The self-proclaimed king said that having just woken up, he saw how an island method appeared from somewhere. He hastily activated the system. The old man briefly told about what had happened earlier. They say that once a mysterious plague spread across the entire land, and a great catastrophe occurred in which 90% of the population died. Although the cause of the outbreak could not be established, the other survivors, besides him, fearing a repeat, decided to descend to the surface. But he, as king, did not approve of this and stayed alone to continue the investigation. After years of investigation, it was discovered that the magical essence, which came to the heavenly island through the air current, harmed their genes. He quickly pushed the island away from the essence flow, and then tirelessly searched for those who had left the island to bring them back. Scattered people were hard to find, and those who were found had already gotten used to life on the surface and did not return. He asked people to always return to the island, and they say he fell asleep in a stasis device to avoid loneliness, which he set so that it would activate as soon as anyone from the citizens returned, but he never imagined it would remain inactive for 2,000 years. The machine was full of malfunctions, so it did not work when people from another world entered there. Therefore, the clouds outside, which they had just seen, were a defense system. He also preserved robots that, as part of the system, switched the main fish into interception mode. The next statement shocked everyone because those fish were previously like airborne weapons flying at enemies with a charge, so he realized that witch magic had saved them. Otherwise, they would have already died. The woman was dissatisfied with his action because she believed that if he had contacted others on the island, the situation would have been better. The king did not understand and called the invaders who tried to enter the country an armed army. But those people did not understand at all what he was saying. To show them proof, he immediately raised the stick and created a hologram that showed how many people had entered this place, which was quite strange for such technology. He said the recording was made 172 days ago, and from the clear frame, it was understood that these were the people who tried to invade the country. Letty explained that it was a research group sent to investigate vacuum phenomena. However, the king's actions were also justified because he, being concerned, activated the defense system. Nori then told the old man to look carefully and understand that they were only observers and had no bad intentions. When this territory was expanded, access to the island was restricted due to the investigation, and tourists behaved hostilely, while armed soldiers tried to calm them down. The king realized his mistake of not reviewing the video and, at Norris's request, they agreed to deactivate the defense system because they wanted to discuss it with the neighboring island to continue using the island as a tourist spot. The neighboring country was also considered part of the heavenly island Kazo. The king was not satisfied with what he proposed to his country and decided to remain completely alone. But Nori reminded him that if he did so, he would live alone without any help. It would be strange to be a king without subjects, just like a goddess who had no one to save in the whole world. And she explained that the survival of many people from the neighboring country depended on his approval. Therefore, he must think and decide to live together. They added that the island was a great attraction, and if this place could not be used, the lives of the people there would be destroyed. Since the leading person was a representative of Bella, she even asked the man to support. After a long pause, he smiled slightly and introduced himself as Basil, who immediately ordered to open the gates. When permission was received, he was ready to release it and asked them to go where they planned to disable the defense system, including the clouds, and also wanted to meet with the representative to teach him how to govern the country. The lady was very happy after receiving the explanation. But there was one more thing. The king had questions, and he asked who those two were, including Nori and Koji. They then asked about the purpose of their stay on this land. Finally, suspicion was reduced to the fact that 2 people were suspected, and all this happened thanks to Nori's explanation, who said that it was a perfect world, and the king was satisfied. After that, the defense system was finally deactivated, and the island was ready to receive tourists again. For the next matter, a representative meeting was held, where the king learned about their difficult financial situation and was quite angry. Bella could not utter a single word, and he continued to lecture continuously. She was appointed as a city councilor who was supposed to give her advice. At that moment, everything calmed down a bit, and Koji felt a little sorry for Bella, and wanted to help her with something because she was almost crying due to constant reproaches. So Nori decided to change the subject and suddenly began talking about his wings. Out of nowhere, she said that Bella was a descendant of the king, so the meeting became fateful. Even the king had an opinion, so he asked the lady for a weapon, and when he received it, he decided to conduct a DNA test from her connection. A needle suddenly protruded from it to check blood parameters. As soon as the test was finished, the probability of blood relation was 99.5%, and he declared that they were blood relatives. This was quite interesting information, presented in simple words. The only clarification was that in that country, everyone who had wings was a relative of the king. The king was glad that after 2,000 years he was not alone, but the woman was crying because of the needle, which he did it without her consent. Basil realized the mistake, began to apologize, praised her for taking care of the city, and offered to take care of it from now on. And when it became known that they were relatives, the man became kinder than before. When the bugs were fixed, they also decided to review their finances. After a successful meeting, they went to Sky Island to the observation deck and were able to see fish in real time. Other workers greeted them with a cloud, and it was spectacular. The king stepped forward to help them and personally guide them through the city. And this time they were welcomed on the red carpet. Everything was going well. It was time to create memories, so they decided to take a photo. When everything was ready, the king thanked Koji for coming to support the connection with the city residents, because he believed it was thanks to him, and Koji thanked the king for allowing them to have a good spot. And at that moment, the photo was finally taken and a memory appeared. It was time to return. They were thanked for using the heavenly island, and they happily left, thinking they had visited it for free. And it was then that they remembered they did not have to pay a commission. But the witch offered to join their team and do everything for free if they allowed her to continue traveling with them. The offer was quite valuable, and Koji by no means wanted to lose it. When he received confirmation from everyone in the group, they were ready to set off with the team to the next point, which looked very fun. Chiki came to Koji to talk and asked if she wanted to sincerely discuss the previous night. But Koji looked embarrassed and suggested doing it later. She called him to a certain place, which was quite creepy, like a shop, and he had to enter a certain room. He thought it was an invitation to dinner. He was invited as a guest to room 204, where they were waiting for him. When he got there, he saw a lady in a cute outfit waiting for him, and when she turned around, it turned out she was coquettish in a very cute outfit. He was wearing something he did not expect at all. She approached him and said she was now waiting for him to start reaching out to her. He just blushed deeply, and she reminded him of what he said last night in the castle when one of the monsters tried to attack her. When he was jealous because of her, she asked for explanations, but Koji could not say it, and he just praised her for being cute and a very good girl. She could not understand whether he liked her. Number Koji was left with nothing and was convinced that he really liked her. As soon as he said this, she immediately pushed him forward to give a bright kiss, and the kiss just worsened because she believed that such a thing would not harm her. The guy was just not ready for what awaited him next. At the next moment, she immediately pushed him onto the bed. Koji blushed even more and turned completely red. Later, she gently sat on his lap in an awkward position, making it clear that from now on she would not hold back. The boy simply liked her, and then began to put his hands into her shirt. His reaction showed that it was his first time, and his embarrassed face confirmed it, before Koji himself could even manage to ask for anything. The situation escalated because the woman increasingly demanded from him what she needed immediately, while the girl fully enjoyed it as if she had been waiting for it all along. The next day, in front of the Wings Pavilion, Nori read Koji's face and realized that he had really had a good time last night. Although he wanted to object, he could not, because Nori had designed clothes for Chiki, and Chiki sincerely thanked her for everything. Then she approached and whispered to Koji to allow the lady to do the same, and to assure that he was not guilty at all. A special smile appeared on Nori's face. She was very embarrassed, so she decided to immediately change the subject to move on to idle chatter, and proceed to the next item. No one knew where they were really going because she had already planned a trip to the eastern country, and it was necessary to decide whether to stop in every city along the way to check for bugs. Because gathering information and necessary materials would require time and money. Restoring the entire world would take them an eternity. This thought made Nori deeply analyze the situation, because it was ineffective. Suddenly, a voice sounded in the middle of the sky, informing them about the problem, and a hole appeared there. And everything was ready. No one was used to recognizing the voice, and another lady in a beautiful outfit appeared, informing them that the conference of goddesses had ended. Hoji perceived her as Nori's superior. She was introduced as Lady Sophia. She held several very large balloons and was there to talk to Nori. Hoji was very embarrassed by her presence and wanted to learn more. He realized that the day had finally come when they were to be saved from mortal danger by transfer. Kelvin did not like that the goddess was taken away and reassigned, so he even shouted at Sophia that she had no right to make that decision. Although they were in trouble, they could find a way out, and the witch thought so too. Moreover, Chiki absolutely did not allow her to take Nori. Sophia politely apologized for the rude behavior of the goddess they sent. She told them it was a simple story about the savior and the saved. She wanted to change the place of discussion, and waving a wand over the floor, she told them that she was watching their every move. When the destination was still undefined, she was there for a certain reason. He did not say that repeated failures had occurred, and her arrival was not a shock to her. At that moment, she was ready to accept the transfer. But Koji intervened, and said that they had already encountered various errors before, and would be able to fix them if Nori stayed there. He was against replacing the goddess, because he said he could do it only thanks to her alone. As soon as he uttered those words, they were already in a distant place where a gentle breeze was blowing calmly. Sophia explained that she never intended to be there for the transfer. Suddenly her voice changed and she explained that she came to deliver some scroll to them. When they unrolled it, there was a map. In fact, the map marked bugs that showed them where to go. Sophia explained that since Nori brought this issue to the higher management, they decided to give her that part. And only it helped them by providing a carriage so they could focus on restoring the utopia. Sophia additionally clarified regarding the change of task. They could not do it because Koji was walking beside her. She told him to take full responsibility because the goddess would never be changed, and that pleased them. Nori, too excited by all the orders, completely devoted herself to saving the boy, and Sophia then quietly left from there, telling them that they were watching her. After some time, both returned to the place where Kelvin was stunned by their sudden arrival. They felt great relief and breathed deeply because the storm had finally passed. Then they told those guys the whole story and showed the map so they could follow. Kelvin was glad that they finally had something reliable on which they could build their further actions. And since one of the marks was in a certain place, he told them that the area, what he just recalled, was Steam City Agility. In the middle of the conversation, Vela suddenly intervened, was glad, and came to thank them for saving the Sky Island, so she leaned in and told about the city they were just looking at. The city was known for its coal mines, and machines with many legs powered by coal walked its streets, and it was called Stein Walker. It was very exciting, and Koji's eyes sparkled because he wanted to see what it really looked like, as he loved mechanical things very much. He even collected things like mechanical wristwatches. He also liked illustrations with a steam atmosphere, and on his computer as wallpaper was an illustration of Machine City. If it was a city that matched his ideas, he was very interested. Bella wanted to offer them help, and said she could take them there on the Grand Hawk. Koji accepted the offer without hesitation and was very happy. At that moment, he was even holding the hands of a woman whom others did not like at all, and asked her to send Bella's meeting to her representative. She explained that due to the peculiarities of the city, the reunion bell could not be used, so they had to send a messenger who had to wait a few days, and it was quite inconvenient that the bell was not suitable for that place. And when the messenger was sent along with the letter like a dove, they spent several days in an extraordinary establishment that Bella had specially provided. There was a problem with the transfer at the location, but after some fuss, everything was settled, and they finally decided to leave the place. They were all sent through the Great Hawk, which was directed there, and the people on the Heavenly Island waved them goodbye. On the way back, they saw huge mountains. Nori slightly noticed how the landscape changed along with the rain. Bella was steering them on that hawk and handled it well. They were worried about her because there was thunder and rain, but the witch knew everything was fine because the spirit of lightning was not nearby. She understood this because the spirit of the wind informed her, and from that place they saw that the spirit of lightning was indeed causing a commotion on the other side. Koji got stuck on describing part of the spirit's appearance in the city. Soon they approached the top of the drop-off point, and when they leaned back, they were lowered to the ground again. They immediately went to look at the mechanical steam walker. It was just visible to them near the main doors. A woman came out from inside and recognized Bella because she hadn't seen her for a long time, and then recognized the guests who were with her. Bella introduced her as Mia, the representative. Mia also knew how they saved Heavenly Island, and how they investigated the strange events in the city. Hoji greeted gently, but she asked him to stop, reminding them that the rain was quite heavy now and they needed to go inside. Bella finished work and decided to return the Grand Hawk to its place. Her friend even waved back at them. Koji decided to come and tell her, showing a photo of the island, that when the time comes, he would visit this place again. Bella was a little touched, so she wiped her tears, wished them a safe journey, and said that they would be awaited. Those guys were in the carriage, and the steam shaga moved forward by itself. When she was shown the map, Sophia said that it was a mine marked in red. The place lived thanks to coal mining. However, 2 years before she became a representative, above the mountain, a little aside from the city, a thundercloud constantly formed. There was a large coal seam, but because of lightning they no longer approached it, and the mine had several byproducts. However, the workers estimated that the coal from there would last only a few years, so they planned to reuse relics of Iris, old machines, and materials from the excavations. In those parts, factory items were sometimes found underground, and in short, they made steamwalkers from them. They tried to find out the reason for what was happening inside, and it was then that Chiki pointed to the place. It was reported that there was another mark, probably a lighting place, and it was quite inconvenient because 2 marks were found in one city. The main character pondered how even the witch noticed and remembered the spirit of lightning. There was a trace of a beetle on the ruins, and although he had high hopes for the city, he could not understand the reason for all this. Continuing the walk on the steamwalker, they finally reached the place, and were greeted in the city where they lived. The main character looked at this with admiring eyes. He was glad to find it exactly as he had imagined. The place was filled with steamwalkers, and he felt that this was a true steampunk world. When they looked up at the sky, he saw something dome-shaped. The main character tried to use a magic orb to contact Bella, but nothing worked, so he immediately asked them to head to where they would stay, considering Sophia's house, where there were free rooms and it was possible to have a good time with a large company. They were happy, and she was glad to help with various matters. The main character was glad to be there, although the insects bothered him, and he wanted to explore as much as possible. Sophia had work, so she decided to leave that place, using the steamwalker. When she reached the excavation site among the ruins, the workers worked hard, and soon the surface became visible. The layer was quite hard, and even reaching that place was difficult. Several drills and walkers had already been lost, but they were in for something stunning. Because they found a dome-shaped, he noticed an unexpected presence beneath it, and wondered what was buried there. In the city during the rain, Nori allowed herself to help people as payment for the end, giving them everything they asked for, being the goddess of plants. In the room, the witch told the protagonist that magic could not be used here. Although she wanted to tell him before entering, she couldn't, because the whole city was covered by a magical barrier. Because of this, they could not connect or use magical tools in that place. At that moment, the witch felt a bit useless, but Chiki approached and said that was not the case at all. She always wanted to be there, and her dog ears were much more attractive. It was a rather awkward assurance, but the witch found it cute. At that moment, other people approached and reported that the emergency patch was made without problems, so they could handle the error themselves. And Koji assured the witch that she was both a sorceress and an informant, and would be useful to them. Nori brought Sophie L. Long, who was to lead them to the marked place, and they decided to plan countermeasures after inspection. The main character thanked her for the shelter and for showing them the city. She wanted to help solve the city's problem in any possible way. But one thing caused concern. The workers at the site worked hard, but things were going badly. The situation was tense, so they had to be careful. This caused concern, but Kelvin, as a merchant, was nearby and resolved everything. At the site, when they were immersed in work, it seemed that Kelvin really turned everything around, because all the workers gladly welcomed them. Everything was settled and they decided to find out about the mistake. But this shocked Sophia. Previously, those people looked very stern, and it was thanks to Kelvin that they were treated well. Nori, knowing this from the modern world, understood that thanks to that man's negotiations, the inspection would go smoothly. Otherwise, it would have been impossible. When he treated them to drinks, including coffee, which they really liked, they were in a good mood and surrounded Calvin. Finally, they reached the desired place and showed them the dome-shaped structure, noting that it was clearly made of a different material than the other mine structure. Although steamwalkers could not extract it further due to the strength of the material, and even with a steamwalker and other machines, the team could do little. Nori offered to take leadership and help dig it out, although it might take time. She believed she could handle it. Sophia was impressed when she learned that it was a difficult task, but Nori again boasted and reassured them, saying that the power of plants should not be underestimated. She decided to plant a large mass of bamboo-like plants under the relics so that they would grow and lift the entire structure. She believed that the growth of the plants was so strong that it could break through concrete and lift the surface, and if Nori was behind it, then it could raise the entire surrounding area to the surface. The plan looked promising, so they decided to try. Nori first spread roots a little to the side. Be careful. Sophia also wanted to stay there a little longer and asked them to change the day and not settle there, which caused concern. Out of nowhere appeared a sorceress, approached, looked at the threads of lightning, and left. She informed the main character that she would go to the heavenly city for a short time and asked for permission. In a hurry, she said that towards the mountain with a large coal vein, It seemed to her as if the spirit of thunder was somehow watching them there where they are now. She constantly felt that she could not use magic there at all, and the main character allowed her to leave, thinking about what connection she might discover. The witch planned to use Bezel's powers to summon a thundercloud and direct the gathered lightning spirits from it onto those in the mine. She wanted to find out why this thunder spirit was causing such chaos.